Hi, this is Catherine Morgan-Nance, and welcome back to part 2 of our Pool Perfect Variance Analysis example. The facts for this example were provided in part 1. I've distilled a few of them here for part 2. Pool Perfect's standard costs for materials are illustrated at the top of the screen. They expect, in order to make one bucket, that they will use 5 pounds of direct materials at $4 per pound, for a total of $20 in standard cost for materials. Now, during the period, Perfect Pool produced 1,000 buckets of its pool cleaning product, and some additional information about materials is also available. The company purchased 5,500 pounds of direct materials at a cost of $21,450. They had no beginning inventory and had 700 pounds on hand at the end of the year. And here's an interesting question to consider. The company recently contracted with a new supplier who is eager for their business. Should the company continue to work with the supplier, or should they look for a new supplier, and why or why not? Let's first consider how we calculate the direct materials price variance. The direct materials price variance is calculated using actual quantities of materials purchased. And the reason for this is that we're hoping to keep the purchasing manager responsible for how well he purchases materials, whether he spends more than he should or gets a good deal on materials. So we look to actual quantities purchased for this particular variance. When we look at the quantity variance, we will see that actual quantities used rather than purchased are the focus in the quantity variance. And that will be because we're hoping to keep the production manager responsible for whether he is efficient or wasteful in his use of materials. Okay, so the price variance for materials is calculated by comparing the actual price of materials with the standard price of materials stated in terms of actual quantity of materials purchased. So I have a spreadsheet laid out here in the first two sections on the left, section 1 and section 2, will help me compute the price variance. So the first thing we do is determine what the actual cost of the materials will be. And the company purchased 5,500 pounds of materials at a cost of $21,450. Now, we really don't need to compute the actual price per unit, but it might be interesting to see what it is when we're looking at exactly how much the company saved or spent more than the standard price. So let's do a little math here. $21,450 divided by 5,500 pounds of material yields a price per pound of $3.9 or $3.90. So we'll put that in to the spreadsheet. 5,500 pounds at $3.90 gives us a total actual cost of $21,450. Let's compare that to the total value of the actual pounds purchased multiplied by the standard price. So they bought 5,500 pounds. The standard price, the price they should have paid, was $4 per pound. So let's insert that in the spreadsheet. So had they purchased the actual quantity at the standard price, they would have spent $22,000, and instead they spent $21,450. So it looks like they did a better job purchasing than anticipated. This looks like a favorable variance to me of 10 cents per pound, the difference between $3.90 and $4 a pound times 5,500 pounds. So let's go ahead and calculate that just in total. Total actual costs were $21,450, and we're comparing those to actual quantities at the standard price of $22,000, and we have a $5,500 favorable variance. If we wanted to just verify the math using kind of our shortcut formula here of actual quantity times actual price minus standard price, we could do that. So let's type in a formula. It's equal to the absolute value of actual quantity, that is 5,500 pounds, multiplied by the difference between the standard price and the actual price. So here's the actual price of $3.90 minus the standard price of $4 a pound. And again, we see that our variance is favorable. Okay, so moving on to the quantity variance. The quantity variance is simply the difference between the actual quantity used and the total quantity we were allowed to use for the actual quantity we produced, and we state that in terms of the standard price. The actual quantity we used is, and I've said this a couple times, how many pounds? It is the 5,500 pounds that we purchased minus the 700 pounds of inventory we had on hand at the end of the period. So let's type that in here, 5,500 pounds minus 700 pounds at a standard price of $4 per pound is $19,200 had we bought or had we used those pounds at the standard price. Let's see how many pounds we were really allowed to use. We produced 1,000 buckets of this product, and we were allowed to use 5 pounds per bucket of material. So we were allowed to use 5,000 pounds, and in actuality, we used 4,800 pounds. It looks to me as though our variance is going to be favorable. Let's state that in terms of the standard price of $4 a pound. The total standard cost allowed was $20,000, but the total cost of the actual quantity used at the standard price was $19,200. So indeed we have a favorable variance. So $19,200 compared to $20,000 yields a variance of $800, and we could verify this variance if we wanted to by typing in a formula basically that's saying standard price of $4 multiplied by the difference between the actual quantity used, 4,800 pounds, and the standard pounds that we were allowed to use of 5,000 for actual production. And that is validation that our variance is $800 in fact. Okay, so we have both a favorable price and a favorable quantity variance, and that should help us address the question I asked at the beginning of this video, which was whether the company should continue to work with this new supplier they recently contracted with. Gosh, they should be happy. The material appears to be good quality. They are able to produce favorably from a efficiency standpoint, and in fact they're getting the material for a better price than anticipated in their standard setting process. So I think that it's a win-win for the company to continue to do business with this new supplier. Okay, so that's it for now, and we will come back momentarily with part 3 and direct labor variances. See you soon.